There are 20 signature moves among the 29 starter Pokemon, because, you know, Pikachu and Eevee count. And just like the legendaries and mythicals, we're ranking all of them from worst to best. Worth noting though, I will not be counting G-Max moves, Z moves, or partner moves from Let's Go, because that would be insulting to moves that are actually designed to be balanced. And I would just put all of them in S tier anyway, so, like, who cares? Also, full disclosure, most of these moves are no longer exclusive to starter Pokemon anymore, but I will still be ranking them based on how well they fit those Pokemon, just so you know. So beginning with the D tier, yeah, we don't have an F tier this time, starter signature moves aren't that bad. We have moves that are just worse than the other moves that they already learn. And going in this tier, we only have 3 moves. The first one is a move that is actually quite useful for other Pokemon, just not the starter that it was originally intended for. Delphox's Mystical Fire. Poor Delphox, man. It's a cool Pokemon with good stats, good typing, and in my opinion, a good design. I know I'm deeply in the minority on that one, but between its hidden ability Magician and former signature move Mystical Fire, it did not get any help. Mystical Fire is a 75 base power attack that always lowers the foe's special attack, which is a bonus effect that's only situationally useful. On top of that, back in X and Y where this was truly Delphox's signature move, it was only 65 power, so it was even less useful. To be honest, you will almost never see a Delphox run this move over the much more reliable Flamethrower or even Fire Blast. Although this move did formerly have a niche on Delphox's Toxic and Wish Stalling sets, but since Delphox doesn't learn Toxic anymore like so many other Pokemon, there's no longer much of a reason to run Mystical Fire. It's a shame because the move is actually super useful on other Pokemon like Gardevoir, Mismagius, and Sylveon, but on an actual fire type like Delphox, there are just so many better fire moves. The next move in this tier is just a victim of circumstances, and if you watched my video on starter Pokemon a few months ago, then you may already know where this is going. Sceptile's Leaf Blade. Leaf Blade actually used to be a great signature move for Sceptile back in Gen 3 when all grass moves were special. Good enough that if we were still in Gen 3, I would probably rank it a lot higher. Well, maybe not a lot, it was only 70 base power in Gen 3, so it wasn't that great, and would still be outclassed by Leaf Storm in Gen 4. But yeah, with Leaf Blade being recategorized as a physical move in Gen 4, the move no longer fits Sceptile, who primarily uses special moves. And Sceptile itself is stuck with special stats that no longer fits its physical move pool. Overall, it's just an incredibly unfortunately aged Pokemon. And again, I'm aware that Leaf Blade is like an A tier attacking move for most grass-type Pokemon. The reason it's ranked this low is strictly because it doesn't work for Sceptile. And lastly, we have Emboar's Heat Crash, a move that does more damage the heavier you are than the foe. In a competitive context, this move is hardly used against the larger, fully evolved crowd. Plus, Emboar is not as heavy as you may think, weighing in at only 330 pounds, which is about the size of your average American. And if you weigh even half as much as Emboar, this move hits with a pitiful 40 base power, the same power as an Ember. This move is just terribly unreliable. Even at its maximum power of 120, the move is always outclassed by Flare Blitz, which gets a boost from Emboar's hidden ability, Reckless. Moving into the C tier, we have moves that are just decent. There's not much else to say about them. These are moves that you would maybe want to use during like a main story playthrough or some very niche competitive situations, but there are still options that are a bit better. The first move here is Inteleon's Snipe Shot. At 80 base power, 100% accuracy, and a raised critical hit ratio, the move decently plays off Inteleon's Sniper ability, which makes critical hits do 50% more damage. But what sucks is that Inteleon no longer learns Focus Energy in Gen 9, so critical hit builds just aren't as reliable as they used to be in Gen 8. And even then, Inteleon has options like Hydro Pump and Scald, which are capable of dealing just as much damage without all the setup work included. Next up, we have Blaziken's Blaze Kick. At 90% accuracy and only 85 base power, it feels a little unreliable for how weak it is compared to modern day attacks. It does have a raised critical hit ratio though, and can sometimes be used as an alternative to Flare Blitz if you want to avoid recoil damage late in a match. But most players are willing to eat the recoil damage if it means they always hit with Flare Blitz though, making Blaze Kick a much more rare pick. Even in Gen 3, Blaze Kick isn't an amazing move for Blaziken since all fire moves were special, which means it's far weaker than Overheat or even Flamethrower. And the only reason most people use Blaze Kick in a main story playthrough is simply because Flamethrower is really inaccessible in Gen 3 for some reason, only being viable at the Maulville Game Corner, which really isn't worth the price. Moving along, we have Pikachu's Volt Tackle. Now, I know, looking at Volt Tackle on paper, this should be an A tier or even an S tier move. So why rank it so low? Simply put, it just doesn't jive with Pikachu or Raichu as much as it should. These Pokemon have far better special move pools to take advantage of, and they both have really low HP stats as well. which means without healing you can only use Volt Tackle like once or maybe twice a battle if you're lucky before you KO yourself. It can be a good clutch move for a tight late game situation, but it's still an option that most users of Pikachu or Raichu are probably going to avoid. We also have Primarina's Sparkling Aria here. I originally had this one a bit higher, but after some consideration, I moved it down because like so many other water starters, the problem is there are just better water type moves out there. Surf is just Sparkling Aria, but slightly more powerful. The only difference is that it lacks the secondary effect where it heals burns. But let's be honest, how often are you healing your own teammates' burns with Sparkling Aria? More often than not, this effect is probably working against you more than it's working for your teammate. The only real positive is that it's a sound-based move, so it goes through Substitute. But in singles, most of the time Primarina is probably running Surf or Hydro Pump for the extra damage. I suppose you could use this attack with Throat Spray to get a special attack buff, but again, I'm not really sure if it's worth it since most Primarina builds would rather carry Leftovers or Assault Vest. And if you are using Throat Spray, then Liquid Voice Hyper Voice is just the same move, but it doesn't hit your teammate. Overall, it's just kind of a weird move. If it didn't heal burns or hit your teammate in doubles, it could be a lot better, like there are some situations where those effects are useful, but it's a tough one to rank, honestly. And in a very similar vein, we have Swampert's Muddy Water. In the main story or a competitive singles match, you are most likely avoiding Muddy Water due to its relatively low 85% accuracy, but Muddy Water is a pretty good VGC attack. Good enough to where it could be ranked A tier or B tier due to the fact that it doesn't hit a teammate, unlike Surf. The problem is, Swampert itself is unlikely to use it since Swampert is more of a physical attacker. And nowadays, you are much more likely to see them run attacks like Liquidation or Flip Turn. Plus, like its Gen 3 comrade Blaziken, Swampert was probably never going to use Muddy Water in its debut generation because Surf used to not hit teammates either. Oopsie. This move does have a pretty good bonus effect as it has a 30% chance to lower the opponent's accuracy, which I think overall makes it more valuable than Primarina's Sparkling Aria, but I'm just not confident that it's ever been the best move for Swampert specifically. Honestly, both Sparkling Aria and Muddy Water are weird moves with a lot of variables. They are probably the two I spent the most time going back and forth on, but I realized if that's the case, then they're probably not above C tier. If you're learning anything so far, be sure to subscribe so you never miss a new video. It's free! Okay, so finally moving into the B tier, we have moves that are still only situationally good. They're still not definitive options, but they are going to be used maybe half the time, depending on the context. The first one is Incineroar's Darkest Lariat. In Gen 7, this move was definitely A tier. It was Incineroar's go-to dark-type option. Pretty reliable with 85 power, 100% accuracy, it ignores defense changes, and it could be upgraded to the Z-move Malicious Moonsault. But the problem here is that Game Freak gave this thing freaking knockoff in Gen 8, so you're probably seeing it run that in most scenarios. Still, I believe that Darkest Lariat provides the smallest bit of utility, and I'll at least give it some points for being a move that was amazing at one point in time. And you know what? If Game Freak ever takes knockoff away from Incineroar, please God, do it! Do the right thing, Game Freak! Then Incineroar is probably going back to using Darkest Lariat. Maybe that's some copium on my part, but they have been more aggressive with moveset changes in recent generations, so I wouldn't say it's impossible. Also in this tier, we have Chestnut's Spiky Shield, which was only exclusive to him in XY before they gave it to Cacturne and Maractus and Oras, but hey, it still counts! Spiky Shield is a move that sees less and less usage on Chestnut every generation as its move pool gets wider, but since it's just Protect but does damage, it's always going to have a small niche. Particularly in VGC, even if Chestnut is a very uncommon VGC Pokemon. It certainly sees more usage on Pokemon like Ogerpon or Glamora, but it's not useless on Chestnut, it has utility. Moving to another grass type, we have Rillaboom's Drum Beating. Drum Beating is an 80 base power move that always lowers the opponent's speed stat, which is incredibly useful, but the problem is, Rillaboom most of the time is just going to turn off its brain and use Grassy Glide instead. And if you want damage, then Woodhammer generally is ran over this attack. So this move sits in an awkward spot where it's pretty darn good, but Rillaboom just has options that make it kind of irrelevant. Regardless, this attack still sees occasional usage in both singles and VGC, so I think B tier is appropriate, since it can be used in multiple formats, despite its dropping level of usage. And to round out this relatively small tier, we have Hisuian Typhlosion's Infernal Parade. This move is basically just a slightly weaker Hex, being a ghost-type attack that doubles in power when the opponent has a status. But what makes this move better than Hex is the fact that it has a pretty generous 30% chance to burn the opponent. So if you're lucky, you can get that nice 120 powered Infernal Parade in only 2 turns. If you're not lucky, then you'll probably just wish that you ran Shadow Ball instead. Advancing to the A tier, these attacks aren't broken, but they are still pretty consistent options with some very good bonus effects. And starting this tier off, we have regular Decidueye Spirit Shackle. At 80 base power, 100% accuracy, and an effect that prevents the opponent from switching, this is a really solid attack for Decidueye. The only reason this move isn't run on every Decidueye is that Decidueye can run decent special attacking sets instead with Nasty Plot, or it can use Poltergeist now for more damage on the physical side, but even if Spirit Shackle has 30 less power than Poltergeist, the perfect accuracy and Shadow Tag effect are worthwhile enough that you'll probably see this move used more often. If only Decidueye were a faster Pokemon and could take advantage of that trapping effect more often, then this move would be even better. And on that note, why don't we also talk about Hisuian Decidueye's Triple Arrows? It's a move that we don't think about very often because unfortunately Hisuian Decidueye is a pretty terrible Pokemon competitively speaking, but Triple Arrows is anything but. At 90 base power, 100 accuracy, an increased critical hit ratio, a 50% chance to lower defense, and a 30% chance to flinch, this move is absolutely wild. If you gave this to any remotely fast fighting type Pokemon, it would be incredible. And honestly, the move is still incredible. It's just stuck on Hisuian Decidueye, unfortunately. Since Decidueye has such low speed, the flinch chance probably means nothing in most cases, and even the defense drop doesn't help a ton, so you will sometimes see Hisuian Decidueyes opt to run close combat instead. This is definitely an S tier move on paper, but it doesn't quite work with the Pokemon it was given to. Also in this tier, we have Greninja's Water Shuriken. Once again, this move faces the same problem that most Water-type signature moves face, that being that there are much more powerful Water-type options like Scald, Hydro Pump, and Surf available. However, among that crowd, Water Shuriken still carves out a decent niche for itself by being a priority attack with the potential for big damage. And as a result, you'll sometimes see Greninjas run both Water Shuriken with another water-damaging move just because of its added utility. Unfortunately, Water Shuriken took a pretty decent nerf this generation, with Ash Greninja no longer existing to buff the move's power and make it more reliable by always hitting 3 times. But on the flip side, Terastallization makes it so you have to respect this move way more if your HP is relatively low. A Water Terra Greninja can still do a ton of damage with this attack. And to close this tier out, we have yet another Water-type signature move, and that is Quaquaval's Aqua Step. Unlike most Water-type signature moves, this one actually doesn't have to compete with that many attacks, since it has the benefit of being the rare physical Water-type move. So pretty much the only competition it has are Liquidation and Wave Crash. And while both of those moves do more damage than Aqua Step, the bonus effect of it always raising Quaquaval's speed is very valuable, especially since Quaquaval sits at a just below impressive speed of 85. But with one Aqua Step, suddenly Quaquaval has the speed to become a sweeper. This move isn't broken by any means, which is why it's only an A tier, but it is arguably the most important tool that Quaquaval has to become a threatening Pokemon. And hey, speaking of broken, we've already reached S tier, which includes our last 4 moves of the video, and surprise surprise, none of these moves are older than Generation 8, with the eldest one in the group being Cinderace's Pyro Ball. At 120 power and 90% accuracy, it's just a more reliable Fire Blast. But most importantly, it's a physical move which fits Cinderace's stat distribution much better. And with Terastallization, this attack got even better this generation, as it allows Cinderace to break virtually any wall in the game. Continuing along with another odd move from Legends Arceus, we have Hisuian Samurot's Ceaseless Edge. This is just spikes, but it does damage, making it an invaluable tool for Samurots looking to lead a team. At 65 base power, it may not seem the most impressive, but when combined with Hisuian Samurot's Sharpness ability and Stab, that's actually a really impressive 146 power. And in the DLC patch, they actually took away its heightened critical hit chance because they knew this attack was already too strong as it was. But even with the nerf, it's still incredibly solid and is a staple on any Hisuian Samurot's moveset. Which leaves us with only 2 moves left, both from Scarlet and Violet. I'm so sorry to Quaquaval, by the way, because Aqua Step probably would have been S tier in any other time period, but it just so happened to come out at the same time as these attacks. Meowscarada's Flower Trick and Skeledirge's Torch Song. We'll start with the latter. What makes Torch Song so good is its guaranteed chance to raise Skeledirge's special attack, which all but ensures that Skeledirge will win any Stall War you throw at it. Combined with other tools like Slack Off, Will-O-Wisp, and Hex, this move makes Skeledirge a huge threat both offensively and defensively. Torch Song allows it to overwhelm nearly anything standing in its way. As for Flower Trick, does this one even need an explanation? With the bonus effect where it always scores a critical hit, the move functionally has a base power of 105, and lets Meowscarada punch through walls that have already been set up. And like Cinderace's Pyro Ball, its massive power just means it gets even more of a boost from Terrestrialization. There is no drawback to using this attack, and no other physical grass move in its arsenal comes close to providing the same utility as this one, which is why it may very well be the best signature move among all the starters. And so that is every single starter Pokemon signature move ranked. Do you agree? Disagree? Let me know in the comments down below. But don't forget to leave a like on this video if you enjoyed, subscribe for more videos just like this one, and I'll see you guys next time.